A lot of people talk about burnout as this thing that suddenly happens. All of a sudden I'm burnt out and I'm sick and I can't go to work. And it's actually not. I read a study recently that said about 93% of us have some level of burnout constantly running. The mild version of burnout is I'm a bit forgetful, I get distracted, I find myself reading the same thing over and over. And people often dismiss that as, oh, I'm just busy. It's actually the early warning signs that you're doing too much.
I'm your host, Nick Brax, and this is Move Your Mind, where I have raw conversations with the world's leading minds about the hidden struggles behind their success and the mindset it takes to become the best version of yourself. Are you actually productive? Or are you just busy? In this episode, Donna McGeorge flips a productivity conversation on its head and asks the harder question. What can you remove? Donna, so nice to meet you on a Monday morning in Brisbane and a Sunday night in New York. But yeah, thank you for making the time.
Absolutely my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Nick.
Appreciate it. Are you able to, well, I'm just going to dive in here. Are you able to just give me a background on yourself and the work you do, just so our listeners can get a bit better understanding of you?
Sure. So it's hard to know when to start that story. Do I start back with, I was a Navy brat and raised by my dad, so I was always pretty good at being on time, being super productive. We were very structured and orderly, which then resulted in me being a speaker, coach, author in the space of productivity. But where I'm a bit different to a lot of people, so I work with organizations, I coach leaders, I work with teams, but I'm a little bit different because I'm not about, let's look at your to-do list, let's make sure that you're doing the urgent and important stuff. I'm really about making sure that we focus on the right things. So that's kind of my angle on this.
Interesting. Yeah, right. So really is it trying to really get that right first before you dive too deep in?
Absolutely. So I think most people react to their workload, meaning I've got all this work to do. How am I going to fit it all in and make it all happen in my world? Whereas I like to say every now and then we need to stop and take a breather and go, before I even look at my workload, how much space, how much capacity, what's going on in my life, what have I got room for? And try to, rather than fitting life in the gaps, we try to make our work, no, I'm not saying work goes in the gaps. That's, everyone will just switch off if they hear that because it's not practical. But it's more about putting it into perspective rather than just operating on a kind of autopilot or default setting.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I guess like even with you, Donna, like we've just chatted, I'm looking at you, written 15 books, speaking on stages, doing all of these different things. The natural thing is to think, oh my God, she must be working around the clock. How does she do that? And then you try and we see this on social media all the time now where we see these things. I fall into this all the time. And you think, oh, I'm not doing enough. I've got to do more. I've got to do this. I've got to add that. And by virtue of doing that, you end up almost doing nothing because your attention is pushed in so many different directions. But it's very easy from the outside to look at, one person's body of work and think, okay, I'm not doing enough because I can't compete with that.
Right. So, oh my God, Donna McGeorge has just written 15 books. What am I doing sitting here on my lazy ass doing nothing, right? So I really should be writing. It's like, first of all, that's not true. Secondly, I'm not actually that busy. So, and I don't really like the word busy. So it might appear to, but because I've got a really great team who help me with my social media, I have pretty good presence and positioning. I do speak at conferences. I'm speaking at one this week. But I typically am very mindful of I think about my future self a lot. And so when I'm starting to take bookings and I'm starting to fill up my calendar, the first thing I do is I look and go, will my future self thank me for this, or will it be pretty grumpy because I've now filled up my week with stuff? And I sometimes think we're a little bit loose with our future selves' time and energy. We kind of go, oh, she'll be fine. She'll manage. Yes, she can do a conference in Cairns one day and jump on a plane to Melbourne another day and then be in Sydney the next day. I'm just like, yeah, no, I don't do that. Now that's partly because I've probably got a bit of a privileged position with my age and experience. but also because I'm very clear that I'm not going to be showing up as my best self if I don't manage my energy appropriately.
It's an interesting point, and I think we all fall into what you're talking about there. We make all of these plans for the future or delay things because we don't want to deal with it in the present, and we'll book it for the future. And we don't really care how crazy that calendar is in the future. We just think, oh no, we'll deal with it then. It's okay. As long as I can just avoid and, feel comfortable now, and then that leads to overwhelm. So I guess it's just, is it learning to make more uncomfortable decisions in the present? Or maybe uncomfortable is not the right word, but, learning to really think about things properly in the present rather than just being more reactive and allowing things to unfold.
Whether it's learning or whether it's making space for it. Because I think what happens when we're in the moment and we're busy and, well, certainly the kind of work I do, my ego can take control. It's like, oh, I have all these requests for work. I'm just going to accept all of them. But for most people in the workplace, your version of that in a workplace is more, I don't want to say no. I don't want to be seen as not a good team player and all that sort of stuff. So I keep accepting and building and building and building. And so I think it's making some space. I think it was Stephen Covey that always talked about, the late, great Stephen Covey, talked about the space between stimulus and response. And so someone says, hey, do you want to do this? And you've got very little space between the question and your answer. And I would say we just got to give ourselves a bit more space between the question and the answer so that we can come up with a good no, or we can come up with, really think about what are going to be the implications of that. And so I think we can all do it. I think we've all got the skill if we want to think of it that way, but we just don't make the space for it because we kind of get on this roll of busyness and we don't think we've got time and space to ponder or make better decisions or consider options.
And does that ultimately lead to a lesser result in our work if we do that?
Oh, I think so. I think, you can only go for a certain period of time. It's like a lot of people talk about burnout as this thing that, that suddenly happens. All of a sudden I'm burnt out and I'm sick and I can't go to work. And it's actually not. I read a study recently that said about 93% of us have some level of burnout constantly running. And so I think what would the world look like if you didn't? What would the world be like if you weren't constantly having this either feeling of anxiety that might be in your body or your brain going a million miles an hour the whole time? And so the mild kind of version of burnout is I'm a bit forgetful, I get distracted, I find myself reading the same thing over and over, and people often dismiss that as, oh, I'm just busy. But it's actually the early warning signs that you're doing too much. So I think the risk is we're always just operating at this kind of heightened level of alert, which is not good for our body. But we're not giving ourselves the chance to even consider doing something better, right?
Yeah. So it's like less is more a lot of the time. I mean, you can't really give anything justice when our brain isn't really built to be taking in so much information and, switching tasks simultaneously. Like we can't really dive properly into anything. And that's been, from my experience as an entrepreneur, doing so many different things, that's been the biggest, and I'm getting better with it, but it's been definitely the thing that's been most difficult for me to navigate. And I see that in so many other people I talk to.
Yeah. So, first of all, we've got a bias towards addition and more and keeping going. And when a problem is presented to us, our instinct is to add something. So, as an entrepreneur, it could be, we've got a problem happening in a particular business. Okay, well, let's add a committee, let's add meetings, let's add resources, let's add more social media campaign, let's add more product, whatever we might do to see if we can solve the problem. Hardly anyone thinks about, is there something we could stop doing, take away, create more space for? What if this particular thing had a bit more air around it? Could that make it better? And so this notion that somehow more, better, faster hustle is the right way to work is I think we're slowly seeing the world turning around that. Like, certainly I'm old enough to remember back in the 80s when that's just how work was. 80s and 90s, you just went hard all the time, 100% on, 100% of the time. But I'm seeing shifts around that now, everything from how millennials approach their work through to the conversations around 4-day work weeks. People are now asking questions around, does it have to be this constant pace? And what's the potential option for better quality of life and work if we used a different model? And I reckon that's awesome.
Well, that's great. Yeah, that is really good to hear that it's moving in that direction. Has it equally moved in a negative direction in the sense of technology, the world moving at such a fast pace where never switching off, you could be lying in bed, being on your phone, still working. You've got social media, we're comparing, we're feeling like we need to do more, capitalism's out of control. Has that side of it equally pushed it in the negative direction?
Well, I think that's it. What we're doing now is a reaction to that. So I think if I think about my daughter, who's a millennial, and she's watched her parents be 100% on, 100% of the time, available, phones, all of that, I'm watching her say, no, I take my dog for a walk and I leave the phone at home. And, whereas we were like, oh, what if someone needs to get hold of you? It's like, well, I'm walking the dog. Like, can they just not wait 15 minutes or so? And so I do think it's a bit of a reaction to that. I'm super curious around things like AI. So I actually wrote a book about AI. It's one of my books called The ChatGPT Revolution, which is pretty much a primer for anyone that's not sure and wants to dip their toes into it. And I'm super curious to see, and I do discuss it in the book, if you use AI to make your life easier. So, for example, when you've been doing a podcast for a while, there was a time in the past where the processing and the production and the editing and all of that would have taken a period of time. But AI now means you can just literally click a button and boom, a lot of that stuff happens. And so what would have taken 2 hours might only now take 15 minutes. And I'm being pretty loose because I don't do a podcast, so I don't really know, but you get the idea. My question is, what are you going to do with that extra hour and a bit that you've just freed up? Is it just going to be subsumed back into you're just going to go do emails and work and whatever? Or do you go, while it's doing that for me, I'm going to go sit in the sunshine, have a cup of tea or coffee and hang out with my kids, or call a friend, or go for a walk the dog or whatever. And so I think we are at this really interesting place where probably for the first time ever, technology could give us more leisure time. And I don't think we're necessarily ready for that just now because we're so used to being on all the time. So I'm very curious to see where it's going to take us.
Yeah, it's interesting. And in the work that I do through, when I'm speaking in companies, that's the experience I have as well, when it's almost like people haven't given themselves permission to just be still. And, because even when it's not work, it'll be every minute filled with family time, dinner, trips, taking the kids to sporting events or whatever it is. Most of the people I talk to, they don't have a spare second for themselves, and they don't really remember what it's like to just sit and literally do nothing, let your mind wander, let whatever thoughts come up, and that becomes really confronting when you're not used to doing it. So I think you're right that we're not quite ready for that yet.
No, and we've forgotten about the value of boredom. So I read another study a few weeks back about the hypothesis was the correlation between, the rise of technology and its accessibility, the accessible technology, mental health, which I don't think there's any surprises there that there's a correlation between that, and our intolerance for boredom. And so the study looked at, what does boredom really mean? And it's usually a feeling of restlessness that we have for not doing something. And these days we get a feeling of restlessness. We just reach for our phone and start doom scrolling, right? And how many of us have caught ourselves scrolling and not even reading anything, like literally scrolling and not even looking and reading, but we're just doing something, right? And it talked about boredom, the physiological reaction to that is usually a trigger to either physically do something differently or ask some deeper questions in our heads. And so because the moment we get restless or bored, we immediately pick up a device. We're not asking ourselves the questions like, why am I really here? Should I really be doing this? And is this, meaning of life stuff? And this particular researcher suggested that's also contributing to the mental health issue, because we don't give ourselves the space and time to just explore, even in our own heads. And then another study I read said that even when people are given the time and space to explore in their heads, they'd rather give themselves an electric shock than go into their own heads, right? So we're just, this craziness around our resistance to downtime and what we've made that mean, I think is really interesting, and I'm curious about where it goes.
That is crazy. The level of fear, or to doing that. I can't believe that. It's just, the world's gone so far. So we need to. Is it bringing back a bit of? I guess. Well, I feel like now we've got a combination of the two, where we have got a lot of awareness about that, and there are people, I guess, like your daughter that you're talking about, that are making that active change, and then you've got people that are really stuck, and we almost need somewhere in the middle where we can, all have that understanding and incorporate that into our life, and have companies understand the importance of that, so the leaders can be educating about it. But it's definitely got a long way to go.
We really do. I mean, there's some governments who are stepping in. I always look to Scandinavia. They always seem to be about 20 years ahead of everyone else around how they do the world. And we're already seeing mandated 4-day work weeks. I think France has a mandated no email after a certain time of day. Even in Australia, we've got the right to disconnect laws. And so I think it feels a bit motherhoody sometimes that governments have to step in and do that kind of stuff. But clearly, left to our own devices, pardon the pun, we are just going to keep using our devices, right? And so I think we're starting to see that the negative impact on our mental and physical health of being constantly on, which is why we're starting to see some of these initiatives come about. And it's I think when you start to see governments starting to make some of these decisions for us and taking it out of the hands of the organisations, as you said right at the very beginning, sometimes we can see capitalism gone crazy. And it's like, no, sometimes we've got to stop and just say, we're still humans. My daughter has a phrase where she says, I go to work to earn a living. And so I see my job as a way to earn what I need to be able to live my life the way I want to live it. And I love that, right? Because I think we've, over the,
it's healthy.
Over the 20, 30 years, we've lost a bit of sight of that.
Yeah, I'm envious of that, and it's a healthy attitude, and that's the weird thing where if I've gone down a path of trying to follow my passions and create a life of, which has been great. I've gone down this mental health path and started businesses, but I can't really switch off because it's what I love doing, but it's also my livelihood, and you're in the weeds doing it. So sometimes the example you said there, that sounds like that would be really nice to be, go to work, make your money, outside of that, enjoy your life, have your leisure time. It's so hard to create that for yourself if you don't have the structure.
Well, not just the structure, but the pressure that somehow we're always chasing the next thing, or it's got to be bigger. So this could be an age thing, sorry. But I learned probably about 5 years ago that what is enough. So what is enough earnings? What is enough stuff? What is enough? How much work do I want to get me enough of what I need? And it was an interesting shift from we're often encouraged to set targets. Right. And so it's like, what's your target earnings for next year? Right. And let's just pick an easy number. I want to earn $1 million next year. Okay. Go hard and try and earn $1 million. So I started asking the question around why $1 million? Where did that number come from? And what specifically do I need to do to get that? And how much? And when I started doing the maths around all of that, I'm like, I don't know if I need $1 million to live the quality of life I want to have. And so it's a flipped conversation. And we often start more with the, I want to earn, I want to build, I want to be, I want to have, versus the, tell me about the lifestyle I want to live. What do I want happening with my kids or my family or whatever? and what is enough to make that happen. Because I do think we just gear, right? And the more we earn, the more we gear, and then we need more. So this addiction to more, I think, is worth examining for all of us. And where did you arrive at the number or the ambition or the goals that we're setting ourselves, and who are they serving? I mean, I just spoke a mouthful there, I reckon.
It's fascinating though. It's so interesting. And I think there's a lot of studies that show up, I can't remember exactly what it was, but up until maybe 80 grand, it was around that sort of mark, money will improve your quality of life just because it's going to remove core stresses. But above that, it was, you could barely see any change in happiness. So it's,
wrote about that in this one. I think there's, and I'm not going to be able to find the exact page right now, but there was that study that showed that we think earning the six-figure income is going to change our lives, but it creates a whole other set, as you say, whole other set of complexities around that. And so I mean, there's also, I was just reading another, look at me talking about the studies I'm reading, another study around how people in organizations are reluctant to take promotions to managerial roles because the perception of the increase in money is not enough because of the level of responsibility and everything that comes with that. So it's very interesting.
It's interesting. And, it's not to say that you shouldn't be ambitious, but I think it can really cloud things because you could, I think the most simple thing to do is just strip everything back and think, what could I live without and what is absolutely fundamental to me? And then you can pretty quickly come, to a place where you can see what you need to focus on and where you need to put your attention. You can then reverse engineer, okay, well, how much money do I really need to service that, to be able to have that lifestyle? And like you're talking about there, is it worth killing myself to make more money when that's actually going to take away from my ability to enjoy all the things that I wanted to enjoy? And, it's sort of, it's false economy. It's like,
why was I doing it in the first place, right?
Yeah.
I make $1 million to create this awesome life for me and my family. Awesome. But you never see your family. And you've got kids that are growing up that don't have a relationship with a parent. And you're tired all the time. So you're grumpy and cranky and all of that sort of stuff. So it's worth exploring about, what is, I want to say minimum. It's like minimum viable product, right? When they talk about that. But I heard someone say the other day, they were talking about the red bricking. They used the phrase, how do we red brick our project plan? Because I'd rather deliver 90% of the value with only 30% of the complexity. And I thought that was really interesting because anyone who's listening and, maybe just went at the thought of, what do you mean? Don't you want to deliver 100% value? But if 100% of the value means we up the complexity or the time involved or the cost or whatever, blah, 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 suddenly now it's much bigger. Whereas, if we drop all of this complexity down and we still deliver 90% of the value, why wouldn't we explore that? And I think that's kind of what we're talking about here. What if I dropped my goals by 90, or in fact, there is a magic number, 15%. What if I dropped it by 15%? How much adaptive capacity that then gives me in my world. Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah, it's so true. I can think of so many, a recent example even with the podcast. Like I was looking at, how do I make the production level better? How do I do more in person, et cetera, et cetera. And then I was getting so overwhelmed because I was thinking, well, there's a huge cost with that. How do I even get the guests I want to get to come on? Because you've got to be in the same location, the same time. Like it probably 10x's the workload.
Yep.
And like you're saying there, I don't even know if it would be 10% more of a result from doing it.
Right.
So but then you want to do it because your ego's getting in the way of thinking, no, but I need to compete with these other people and do it on their level and do this or that. And if anything, that often just like leads to burnout, or it leads to you pulling the pin. You don't enjoy it anymore. You're like, this is too much. Like, I'm not going to do it. It's crazy.
Now, the thing that I used to do, because I loved having awesome conversations with people that I normally wouldn't have had the opportunity to meet or talk to, now becomes this big thing. I was
Yep.
very, very fortunate to do a yoga retreat earlier this year in Byron Bay, which is a beautiful part of Australia.
Beautiful.
And I won't say I was cured, but I came close, I reckon, cured of comparison. When she said, everyone is on their own, this is the yogi teacher, everyone's on their own journey, and everyone's on their own path. And it's nearly a, what's the right word? For want of a far better turn of phrase, a God-given journey, right? So it's, and no matter what you do, you can't really change it. That's the journey that you're on. So it's a bit fatalistic, I guess. But what she said was, and so there's no point you looking at someone else's podcast or someone else's books or someone else's speaking business or someone else's life and go, oh, I want what they're having, because you're on exactly the right path and they're on a very different path. And I got to say, I've come out of that, and it's reduced, I reckon, my angst. Ambition's not the right word, but pressure to perform it at whatever level I'd perceive to be this high level, because, well, that's actually not my journey. My journey is this one, and I'll just keep doing what I'm doing and get the results that I'm getting and live the life that I'm living, which is awesome. Thank you very much. So I feel very privileged, because comparison is so hard. So you say, I look at their podcasts and the guests that they get and the exposure that happens. Now, there's consequences, cost, etc. around it, but there's other consequences of that too, right? And the good question is are you up for that? You know? And that's not just you. I mean, anyone that's listening, are you up for the other consequences of that? Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And it really is, you know, I guess comparison is the thief of joy. You know, it's so true. And it's crazy. Like you can switch from loving, you know, being so immersed in what you're doing, you're on a path that is true to yourself, you're happy with it, to then you go down that comparison angle and it's actually so cruel to yourself. Like you're dismissing everything that you value and care about, and it's crazy. Yeah, it really is. And I was just thinking about it the other day of, if I was looking back on my life, even if you could get all of those results, what are you actually going to care about? You're going to care about, was what I was doing meaningful to me? You know, the process of it, was it in line with my values? Whether you get the results or not won't be the thing that you look back on. That's sort of irrelevant really in the bigger picture. It's more about the choices you made and the connection, all of that side of it.
Well, this is Bronnie Ware's work around the 5 regrets of the dying, or I think that's what it's called. And no one goes to their death going, gee, I wish I'd got more results. But they always say all the stuff, the values stuff, my relationships, you know, just, was I true to myself? Was I happy? All that stuff. So it's hard to get that, though, when you've got all the pressure of the world. Like, you turn on the television or you go to your social media. And, you know, I was thinking about this today. I think it was my sister said to me, my mum said, oh, maybe I should get a gym membership next year. And Mum, Joe's like, my sister Jo goes like, why? Oh, I think I should exercise more. And Jo goes, well, why don't you just go for a 10-minute walk 3 times a week? And once you're doing it for free, you've got consistently doing a little bit of exercise for free 3 times a week, then you might consider going and paying for it. But the pressure to join a gym, you know, all that sort of stuff is so hard. Not just join a gym, but do more, be more, have more. We're bombarded with this. And it's like, you know, a 20-minute walk will do a job, or you've probably got enough clothes in your wardrobe. Thank you very much. You can probably get rid of a few just quietly. You don't need a fancy new car. Like, it's just so much stuff we're bombarded with.
We've just overcomplicated the crap out of everything. And like you're saying there, that is the very thing that leads to not getting the result anyway, because you look at the exercise example, exactly what you said. It's like, well, get your membership, do this. Well, you're probably going to be overwhelmed. You're probably not going to keep going. Most people don't, because you don't have a base level. You're going to walk in there, see all these people doing these, you know, that are at a higher level, and intimidate yourself, when if you do what you said, spend 6 months walking 10 minutes 3 times a week. That might lead to 30-minute walks eventually, might lead to some jogging. Then you've built a base, you've built a habit, you've got that, you know, fundamental system behind you. Then you can go to the gym. But we all want to jump 20 steps ahead.
We do it all the time. We go from 0 to 1,000 straight up, which is why I love the work of James Clear. Wish I'd written that book, by
Love
the way.
that. Yes, same.
Great book. And he just talks about being 1% better, right?
Yeah.
And so, as you say, the best I might be able to manage is 5 minutes. And then the next day, 6 minutes, 7 minutes. And before I know it, I'm walking for an hour, right? And so I think we underestimate, and he's got all the maths in his book around how much more you can achieve by just being 1% better at each, repetition of whatever you're doing, that gets much more results than saying, I'm going to go to the gym, right?
I think it's a cure for overwhelm because, you can't really get too overwhelmed. I do that all the time now. I look at it whenever I feel myself putting too much pressure on myself. I'll say, okay, how can I move the bar this week by 1%? And it's a relief. You're like, oh, that's pretty easy. I can do this little tweak. That's it. Yep. Probably more things I could do, but I'm just going to focus on that. And it just pulls you back in line because it's too easy to get overwhelmed now. It really is. It's
too easy to fall for the trap that somehow this will fill the gap that I've identified in, I'm going to be a bit, like this gets a bit woo-woo, that I've had, somehow there's a gap in my life. And I think as little as a coffee will fill it, through to a gym membership, through to a relationship or whatever, suddenly I've got a gap and that's the thing that will fill it. And I just think we're a bit, we're a bit not fragile, at risk because there's so many people telling us what we can fill our gap with.
Well, I don't think that's woo-woo at all, though, what you're saying there, because where, and even if you improve by 1% and get the result is not going to fill the gap. The thing we've got to fall in love with is the process. We've got to fall in love with what we're doing. This conversation now, be like, I'm enjoying this because I'm not thinking about other things. I'm trying to learn from you. So I actually get so much out of it myself. If I'm sitting here thinking about all of these other problems I've got, I'm going to be in a different place and I won't have a good experience. You won't have a good experience. And what's the point? It's just that's like, it. Yeah.
And with this, the idea of being fully present to the moment is a bit lost on a lot of people. So which is what I feel like you're describing here. You and I right now are fully present to this conversation, having a rip snorting time. I don't know whether anyone listening to it is enjoying it, but I know we're having a good time. But and I don't want to kind of be judgy around this because, it's not my place, but how often our devices are sitting right there next to us out for dinner or at the movies, and literally the last thing you do before the movie starts is you're having a quick scroll before the movie starts. It's very rare. And someone was saying to me that there's a whole generation of people that don't know how to just queue in a line for a movie. And I think the analogy they used was going to see Star Wars, and that's just me showing my age, right? And the queues were out the door and around the corner to get in to see Star Wars at the cinema. And the energy in the queues of meeting people and talking and having a yak and all that sort of stuff, it just never happens anymore. And I saw someone else talk about this around the elderly. Like not that long ago, the elderly would be in a queue or on a bus or in some kind of context where they're kind of alone, and they might make eye contact with someone and start up a bit of a conversation. And in that moment in their day, their life was improved by a little bit of a conversation. They didn't feel so lonely or disconnected. Now, no one would make eye contact. We all look at our phones, and these little moments of connection that we used to be used to just don't happen. So I love the idea of just being present in the moment and not thinking about anything else and parking the stuff, right?
If you're feeling stuck, you're not alone. Most people don't realize how connected your mental health is to your body. From your gut to your sleep, movement, food, mindset. Getting active each day can shift how you feel, build confidence, and transform your quality of life. At Move Your Mind, we guide you through this process step by step. If this resonates and you want to learn more, simply go to my Instagram at Nick Brax and click the link on the bio to fill out an application, and I'll send you over more information about the program. Thank you so much for supporting this podcast. If you find the show helpful, please share it with a friend and follow me on Instagram. It really helps.
It really is sad when you think about it, like you're saying there, and you see it everywhere and no one's immune to it. I mean, I talk about this stuff, I fall into it every day, and I was on the subway today and I was looking around, and I would say more than 95% of the people I looked at are looking down at their phone. And you're like,
Yeah.
what? It's crazy. And again, I'm not immune to it. You know, I fall into it all the time. But yesterday I went and I sat in a diner for 3 hours. I just wanted a day of doing nothing. So I sat there, just had a coffee and didn't do anything. I just looked around and I had the best time. I was on my own and I was hearing other people's conversations, people watching. I was like, oh, this is actually, I never normally would do that. I'm normally distracting myself. And it was an amazing experience just sitting there and taking in your surroundings.
I can't think of his name right now, but I do quote him in the book. The guy that went off grid for a period of time. I wish I could think of his name right now. Sorry, listeners. And he said he took himself to, I don't know, a cabin in the woods somewhere and literally went off grid. He said for the first 3 days, it's what people describe, because I know I've done it, as like when you don't have sugar, like when you're trying to bust your sugar habit. And he said he was cranky and he was really restless and grumpy and da-da-da. He said, but after about the 3rd day, suddenly he could hear better, could see clearer. It's almost like a fog lifted off all of his senses, not just his mind. And I think we've lost, it's a little bit like we've lost how to taste food without sugar in it. We've lost how to perceive the world without distraction. So I applaud you for your 3 hours sitting in a diner. I'm a bit envious now. I'm like, oh, I think I might go do that myself. Go sit in a diner or a restaurant for 3 hours and just watch the world go by.
Yeah, highly recommend it. But it's crazy. And I think it's humans, we're crazy because we're incredibly intelligent but incredibly stupid, because all these advancements to make life easier, but equally we're not actually using the advancements to our advantage to be able to do the very thing that was free in the first place, which is just, the fundamentals, be able to enjoy the moment, be with family, be in nature, these basic things that are free to everyone, we're denying ourselves of, and we're looking for it through, it's bizarre. It's crazy.
It is. And look, I'm not sure that you and I are going to solve that problem sitting here today, but it's interesting to be, I always think people say it's an interesting time to be alive, like always is an interesting time to be alive. And I'm so interested to see how the next generation, the millennial leadership that's starting to come through organizations, and the Gen Zs coming behind them, dying to see how the alphas start showing up at work, just to see the shift in how we think about obligation, how we think about work and commitments. And I just think I've no predictions. I'm not a futurist, just insanely curious about what that could look like.
Yeah, and I'm hopeful about it, because you can see a lot of change. And again, as you were talking about your daughter and the younger generations, you're seeing a big change in awareness about this side of things. So I think it is hopefully a positive thing. A question I wanted to ask you as well, on the financial side, with being able to deal with, the productivity and the things we're talking about, when you're in financial turmoil, it's very hard to think about anything else. And you might be trying to take a break, but your mind is thinking, well, I've got to solve the problem. I've got to solve the problem. I've got to solve the problem. You might try and do more, try something else. You go around in circles, you can't, and then you burn yourself out. So how big of a problem is that? And how do you sort of deal with that I know a lot of our listeners will be in that position. So how would you deal with that?
Hardly anyone says, what could I stop doing that might make this easier, for want of a far better turn of phrase. So you just said it right then. You said, I'm in financial trouble. My brain is going, what else could I do? What else could I do? What else could I do? What could I add? What could I try to promote? What new product could I do? Whatever it might be. And I'm saying, stop. And in fact, this is a bit pluggish for the book, but I used to use this little puzzle with people where I'd say, it's a little crooked bridge. And I'd say, this is the problem that you got to solve. How would you fix it? And they'd have options, like there's a few bricks. Just about everyone says, oh, let's add something to the bottom of the bridge, and that fixes it. Hardly anyone thinks about taking away the red brick, which is where I landed with the red brick thinking stuff. And so my first question would be to stop and breathe, first of all, like if I'm going a million miles an hour, because that's not going to fix anything. They're going over in your head. So stop and breathe. And the second thing I'd say is, before you go thinking about what else could you do, start thinking about what could you stop doing first. And it's really hard. Like, I'm not going to say this is easy, it's really hard when we're conditioned to go, surely there's something else I could do. Surely there's something more I could be trying. Surely there's another thing we could, or another initiative we could try. And so I know in people who have practices like mine, like a, a thought leadery kind of practice, the first thing we do is we go, I'll just do more social media posts, or I'll go and I'll ring more customers, or I'll do that. I'm like, well, okay, what if we stopped a particular campaign and focused on this instead? As you well know, I don't want to kind of teach you to suck eggs, any entrepreneurs that are listening, but there'll be things that you have that are okay. What if we doubled down on those rather than trying to add more here? So
100%.
I'm not going to say it's easy. I'm just going to say it's just a different way of thinking about the problem.
Yeah. No, I think that's so true. And my common thing I would do in the past would be, like, I'd be trying to do the podcast, my speaking, I'd be wanting to make more money. Okay, let's do a startup while I'm doing these things. And almost always the startup would end up failing because your attention's pulled in so many directions. At best, you can sustain trying to do all of that for a small amount of time, and everything falls apart. So I've sort of gotten to that place now where I've just ultra simplified everything and looked at, I'm only going to focus on the things that give me the biggest output that I enjoy, and I'm going to work the rest out. And, because otherwise it pulls you in all of those directions. But I think when you've got that entrepreneurial brain, and again, a lot of our listeners are in that mindset, you're constantly looking for the next opportunity.
And it's hard to switch that off. Now, first of all, let me just say, if life is good and you're making lots of money and you've got capacity for something new, go look for your shiny new thing to do and your new opportunity. That's all good. But your question was around, I'm struggling, I'm not making money, I'm not doing the things I should be, I feel like I'm in a world of pain. That's when you got to do something different. So there's no question that everyone who's listening to this is clever enough to know how to do a startup or something new or whatever. No question. But my question would be, are you clever enough to stop and remove something from your world? And so I love this. So the podcast is going okay. I'm getting some speaking gigs and I want to make more money. So I want to do this startup knowing that it won't go well. My niece, because I'm not an entrepreneur, but I'm a creative type. I've got at least 4 other books lined up ready to go in my brain and in my pipeline.
I love that.
And I have thought about doing a podcast for years. And every now and then it kind of resurfaces again. And I had a business manager who worked with me for a while, and she said, is this quarter project or is it a next quarter project? And I'd say, well, we're probably a bit busy this quarter. Stick it in the next quarter. We'll definitely do it next quarter. And of course, by the time the next quarter would roll around, she'd say, okay, should we do this podcast? And I'd go, oh no, I'm over that now. And
yeah.
And she's really good at helping me figure out that I've no trouble coming up with ideas and things I can do. And, when you're a creative or entrepreneurial type, you can do that. The question is execution and the right timing. And so for me, it's like, put it off till next quarter. And then that also, I think, because our egos get in the way, by the time the next quarter rolls around, no, my ego doesn't want to do that anymore. I haven't got the energy for that anymore. And my attention is now elsewhere. And so, but if I tried to do it in that first quarter, we probably would have done a half-assed job.
Yeah, exactly. And it would have stolen time. I think that's such an important example because I think time will tell us the answers of what's important to us. So if it's still eating away at you to do a podcast in the next quarter and maybe, a year after that, then okay, there's something in this. I'm still really wanting it. But I think for all of us, there's very few things that we have that eat away at us like that. And that to me tells you the answer of where you should be putting your attention. And I guess just quickly going back to that example I was saying about the businesses, I knew that I guess I'm similar to you where it's this creative sort of thing, always wanting to, different ideas, and the business stuff were just ideas I'd get excited about, but not things I really wanted to do. And you can fall in that trap. And again, the world is trying to make us think like that by saying, do this, get rich quick, do that, take this road, take that. And it steals people's attention and leads them down the wrong path. And
it steals their joy. It
steals their joy.
And it steals their souls, right? So
it does.
I kind of think, this Anytime I've made decisions about money, they've usually been rubbish ones, right?
Yeah.
Either I've taken on a job which had more salary and it ended up being a pretty rubbish job, or I've gone for a job, a gig, and because it's paid more, and then it ends up being so. Sometimes high paid jobs are great, and but when it's just if money is just the decision, I find that's let me down. Maybe I'm lucky because I'm nearly 60. I've had a lot of years to think about this sort of stuff. But I often think that if that's the primary driver is just money, then I think that's worth exploring, right? Because you say,
exactly.
what's the stuff? You don't want joy killers. One of my friends, Tracy Ezard, she talks about joy bubbles. And how do we create more joy bubbles in our world? And so if you're doing a podcast or me doing a podcast is going to be a joy bubble, then absolutely do it. But not because I think it might make me truck tons of money, right?
No.
If it
No.
as I'm sure people who are listening will know, probably, I don't know for sure, but I feel like my most successful endeavors are the ones that filled me with joy and nourished my soul. Yep. And that's
Absolutely.
not just to say do what you love and the money will come. It's kind of slightly different, but it is, when I'm doing my thing that I'm meant to be on the planet to do, it just seems to flow.
Exactly. And yeah, it's not to say that, okay, but I know the thing I love doing, but I need to make money, of course. Then at those times, you're going to need to maybe do part-time work or do something that you might not love or whatever it is, but not in the bigger picture. I think if you do stay true to yourself, that pays off bigger dividends, even on the financial side, but more importantly in, giving you that joy and like letting you, like we're talking about, enjoy the process and actually get something out of life, not be waiting for life to begin.
Yeah. I mean, look, when I first started out on my own, I had about 3 months where I didn't make much money. And so I took a job as a receptionist in a construction company that I think was a mafia front, just quietly, because there were lots of blokes getting around in black suits and they were all talking about like they were wise guys, right? And I did that for about 3 weeks because I just needed to get the feeling of money coming in both directions rather than just going out. I wanted to feel some money coming in. I've sometimes taken a contract over the years where I just needed to feel like as I said, the flow was going back and forth just when things have gotten a bit tight. So this is not to say I'm not. We always have a joke in Australia where we say, look, if I had to, I'll go and pack shelves at Woolies. And so I'm always ready to go and pack shelves at Woolies, whatever that means, if I have to keep the wolves from the door. And I still don't let the big numbers drive everything that I'm doing.
I love that. No, I think, all amazing advice. You talked a little bit about your book. You've written 15 of them. You're saying you got 5 more to come.
Maybe more.
Hopefully more after that 5 as well.
Yeah.
Can you tell me just a little bit about your most recent book and where our listeners can go if they want to purchase all 15 of your books and anything else?
Okay, if they want all 15, they might be struggling because I always say the first 8 or so were a bit rubbish. So it's only the last 6 or so that are any good. And I shouldn't say that because anyone who writes a book, it's a good endeavor. So Red Brick Thinking is the latest one, and it's literally this notion of strategic subtraction and saying, how about I ask, is there something to remove before I start adding all over the place? And so it talks about 3 types of red bricks. There's emotional red bricks, things like grudges, obligations, guilt that we carry, and what would it take to shed some of that. We talk about cultural red bricks like hustle and stimulation and those kind of things, and the world telling complexity, the world piles all that stuff on us. And then there's structural red bricks that often live in organizations, just the way we've always done things, systems, processes, all that sort of stuff. And where might we be able to identify them and remove them? And so the phrase we use is this something that could use, do you need to red brick that? Like it's time to give something a good red bricking, right? So that's that book. These ones here, these are the It's About Time series. I've been writing about productivity nearly forever. And they were as a result of people telling me in organizations the things that make their life difficult. They, spending too much time in meetings, they're feeling like they're running out of energy and feeling like everyone's always wanting a piece of them. So those 3 books kind of address those 3 problems. Now, you can get all my books on Amazon. You can get, if you're in Australia, Booktopia carries my books. And if you can't find one that you want, if you're looking for one of my older ones, you can reach out to me via my website and you can pick them up there.
Amazing. Well, I've written 1 book and I know how much effort that took. So to do 15, I can't even imagine. Impressive. And I can't wait to read your latest book because honestly, like that example you were showing, it sounds simple, but I mean, I felt just this sigh of relief when you were showing that because we don't think that way and it's crazy. You could remove something that's like, oh, we can actually simplify. It's just such an important thing.
And permission granted. So it's this weird thing where we do exactly what you just said. Wait, I can remove something?
Yeah.
Sure you can. Right? So just in case any of the listeners need permission granted from your Auntie Donna from Australia to go right ahead and remove things. You're allowed.
There you go. Auntie Donna is giving all of us, myself included, permission to remove stuff from our life. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for that. So I finish every episode with 5 closing questions. These can be sort of whatever answer comes to mind for you.
Okay.
The first one being, when was the last time you were vulnerable in your life?
Okay, so my dad has just had a pacemaker put in, and it's very difficult when you see your father, who's always been pretty vital and pretty fit, not looking well. So that was a really vulnerable moment for me.
Thank you for sharing, and yeah, sorry to hear. I hope he's okay.
Good. Yeah, he's
good. Glad to hear. What would you say is currently the biggest burden on mental health in society?
Oh gosh, the devices, right? Full stop.
Yeah. That's
it.
That's
all I have to say about that. It's the devices. Yeah.
I'd say 95% of the people I've interviewed have said social media or devices, internet. It's like AI, all of it. If you could go back and give one piece of advice to your 18-year-old self, what would that be?
Oh, slow down and take a breath. You don't need to slay the world so fast. It's all good. It's all good, Donnie. You got plenty of time ahead of you, and it's going to be awesome.
Yeah. We underestimate how much time. I love the saying about you can actually do everything you want to do, but not all at once, because we don't realize we actually have a lot of time. We just got to, one thing at a time.
Some time.
Absolutely. What does it mean to be truly happy?
Oh, I'm going to be very specific. So my hubby right now is sitting on our back deck with a fresh pot of tea. He knew that I had a call with you today, and he'll have the tea ready, and we just sit there. So for me, I think happy is I don't know, time. Time to be doing gorgeous things that I still run a successful practice, write gazillions of books, and still have time to go sit and have a cup of tea with my hubby on the back deck. Bliss.
I love that. Well, say hi to the hubby. And it's so true. Like, I think about, the things I really enjoy the most would be waking up in the morning, making a coffee, going and, giving my girlfriend a kiss and giving her a coffee. Those little things that you do every day, they're sort of more valuable than all of these other big things we try and do.
They're the things we'll remember. So just very quickly, and I know we're at time, I discovered this thing called Glimmers recently, which is in effect the opposite of triggers. So if a trigger is a person, a thing, a statement, a picture, or whatever that triggers a negative emotion, a glimmer are the ones that trigger joy and happiness. And usually you'll find them in your phone. So at the end of every year, I go back and I start at January 1 and I look through all my photos, and typically they're photos of glimmer moments where I look at it and go, oh, I'd forgotten about that. That was awesome. And they make you smile. And so I now make sure I take photos of those glimmer moments. So make sure you take a photo sitting on that little balcony having your cup of coffee with your girlfriend, because it's a glimmer. And then I create photo albums out of them for myself every year, because they're the things that we want to look back on with joy, right? And
that's amazing.
Back on. Yeah.
I'm going to steal that. I love that. I might make that. That'll be a good present to surprise the girlfriend with.
You're welcome.
I like
Auntie
it.
Donna says you're welcome.
God, Auntie Donna's just giving me all of these gems today.
All
Thank
the
you.
things.
Well, final one, Auntie Donna. What are you most proud of?
Gosh, I think I'm proud of creating a life for myself and my family where we probably spent at least 90% of the time in a state of happiness and satisfaction. Doesn't sound like it's a strong enough word, but we're really happy and satisfied with where we are in our lot. So yeah, I'm very proud to have contributed to that.
Amazing. Well, you can't ask for much more. That's amazing. And the work you're doing is incredible. And I've honestly taken so much out of this. And I genuinely will be reading your book and doing the red brick, removing stuff. So thank you. And again, to all our listeners, make sure to go into the show notes to find the links to everything. And yeah, Donna, thank you so much for making the time.
Thanks for having me. It was great. Thanks, Nick.
And thank you for listening. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the episode and any suggestions for topics you'd like to hear about. Feel free to leave a comment or send me a DM. Your feedback is always appreciated. Please don't forget to click the subscribe button, leave a like or comment, share with your friends, and follow me on Instagram. It really makes a difference. Thank you so much.